Hi, this is Jamey with Stonemeyer Games, and today I'm going to talk about the final module, the final scenario for Time Stories, one of my favorite games of all time. I don't have it with me. I had it last week, but here's a photo from the game. I'll talk about that in a second. But one thing I should say is that if you do play Time Stories and you don't want to spoil anything, I wouldn't recommend watching this video. I'm not going to spoil any major plot points or anything like that, but I'm basically going to talk about some things that you learn about at the beginning of the episode, and really things that you might learn even an hour into it. So just I wouldn't recommend spoiling it. If you don't play Time Stories, though, I think you might see some interesting things from this game, because they do a lot of interesting things. The core idea of Time Stories is that you're time travelers. You're traveling back into the body of someone at a different time, and usually in some sort of supernatural fashion or spin-off of our world. It's not usually exactly what our world is in the real world. And in the final scenario, it's called Madame, and it's French-themed. You're traveling back to 1600s France. All that information is on the box. So that's actually the story behind the photo here. I got some macaroons for our final game since I knew we were going to France. The final scenario does some really, really interesting things, as do any of the scenarios. They all have like a little few interesting rule tweaks. And I thought a few of these would be worth mentioning. One of them is that there was a previous scenario where you could transfer between bodies as you're going through each scenario. So I might encounter a young woman. I might be in the body of a young man, and I might encounter a young woman who is susceptible to this consciousness shifting, and I could jump into her body and continue that scenario. There's something similar to that in Madame, in that you encounter people who are susceptible to the consciousness thing. You can't jump right into them, but you can do something to claim them so that on subsequent runs, you can use them instead of your current characters. This leads to some really interesting decisions in it because, it does take a little bit of effort or time to actually gain control over these other identities. And it adds an interesting choice as to which identities that you want to use on future runs. And I really like that each character has different traits that go beyond just the normal abilities in Time Stories. Like there are all these different traits that are involved in these characters. They really made this like a character-driven mission where the characters you have really do matter for the different areas of the board that you can access and different things that you can do or that you're good at. So that's one element of that. The other element of it that I thought was really cool is that you can create paradoxes in Time Stories, Madame, in that if I am occupying, say, a young man named Henri, and I'm completely making that up. I don't think there's someone named that in this scenario. And while I am occupying his identity, I encounter him in the world that I'm traveling back to. A paradox happens. I can't remember what bad thing happens, but something bad happens if you do that. So it becomes really interesting as you take over these identities that you're actually just trying to avoid the other version of yourself in that past world, which is kind of a classic time travel trope in movies. But I think it works really, really well here. And I don't think I've encountered that before in Time Stories. The last thing I want to mention about Madame is that it does something that no other scenario has done to my recollection, which is that you are given very little time for each run, which I have seen before in other Time Stories modules. But in this, you're given very little time, and it doesn't increase unless you do something to make it increase. So as you're going through these runs in Madame, there are things you can do that give you more time, permanently more time for future runs. And you're doing a lot of runs in Madame. As you jump back in time, you use up your time, and then you jump back forward to the present, and then you do it again. So I really like this sense of progression throughout the scenario, that we started off with so little time, and because of things that we actively did throughout the scenario, we were upgraded more and more and more. Our time got upgraded due to our choices, and I thought that was really, really cool, that we had that sense of progression throughout the entire scenario. Whereas usually in Time Stories, the sense of progression comes from a few permanent unlocks and knowledge. This is like a new sense of progression that they added to this scenario that I thought was really clever. So yeah, those are my favorite things about time stories, Madame. Hopefully this has triggered some ideas in you if you are designing a game that uses any of these types of elements. And if you can think of any other game that uses multiple identities that you can shift between, or time itself is used as an upgrade, gaining more time to do things, I would love to hear about those examples in the comments. Or if you just have a different favorite mechanism in Madame, I'd love to hear about that as well. Thanks.